Right, so this is a suggestion via the nation. The name of the video is The Origins of American Gun Culture. Let's check it out.
If you look at all the maps of the Spanish Empire you can find, you will notice that the Spaniards claimed far more land than they actually had. Claims that were sometimes outright ridiculous, costly, and completely unenforceable. However, in North America, not only did they claim more than they actually had, but being that they were the first to colonize the American continents, one has to wonder why they failed at enforcing all their claims. Claims that stretched from Alabama to Minnesota to Alaska and even to Hawaii, over a total of what are today 27 US states. Guns and property is the short answer. The Spanish came to the New World to conquer existing societies, build new societies, and mold it all into their global empire. Unlike the Dutch, British, and French, who mainly had financial interests, the Spanish idea of empire had more in common with how the Romans built empires. They wished to export the Spanish way of life, assimilate conquered people into their society, and enforce a Spanish social structure upon their subjects. And part of Spanish colonial life was that the colonials were strictly forbidden from owning firearms. Colonial subjects didn't own firearms or even property, but were mostly day laborers on plantations and mining complexes owned by corporate interests like the Basque Guipuzcoan Trading Company. When Spain came to the New World, it encountered large native kingdoms such as the Aztecs, so Spain brought an army and conquered them. But when the Spaniards encountered nomadic native nations in places like Chile, Texas, Venezuela, and New Mexico, they ran into trouble. You can conquer Tenochtitlan, but how do you conquer a constantly moving group of peoples not dependent on one particular spot of land? The Spaniards encountered the same nomadic warfare that bested the Romans, Russians, and Chinese before them. And since they banned their citizens from owning firearms, the only way a semblance of security could be established was by an expensive military presence.
Guys, every single culture that has made an attempt to ban firearms seems to run occasionally like dictatorships. It is what it is. I'm sorry. I know there are lots of people on this planet who absolutely dislike firearms. I am not one of those people. I own a lot of them, right? But I do notice that a lot of these countries end up living in some type of dictatorship-styled country, guys.
In short, it was only safe to live.
Okay, like, guys, at all times, the ruling party should fear for their lives from the citizens. I'm sorry, at all times. All right. But all right.
Where the Spanish crown stationed troops. Elsewhere, well, not so much. Caracas was burned down by a native warband when it was garrisoned by the Spanish army. The Spaniards fought an almost 300-year-long war with the Apaches, Suma, and Mansu throughout northern Mexico, Texas, Nevada, and New Mexico. And unlike the wars we know from popular culture involving the Americans from much later, the Spaniards lost. Ranches were burnt to the ground, mines destroyed, and entire towns pillaged and burnt. The Spanish army was hopelessly lost in this vast region, perfect for ambushes and hit-and-run attacks. Spanish settlers were barred from owning any firearms or form militias to defend themselves. Whatever expedition pushed further north and to the east didn't fare any better. Spanish expeditions sent to explore and settle Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi just disappeared, and presumably because they were wiped out by the Cherokee. Then, in the 1600s, the Spaniards started,
and probably a good amount of the Seminole also. Really quickly though, like, this is a interesting topic here because I live half the year in Spain, right? And gun culture in Spain is zero. There's some like skeet shooting and occasional hunting. You definitely cannot like carry a firearm at like under any circumstance really, unless you're like a police officer. You know, and I think you can actually get like a long rifle, but it's a highly regulated thing. I'm not even sure you can actually drive around with the rifle from place to place, like with it fully intact. I think you have to basically separate all the pieces. Like, under no circumstance, if someone breaks into your house in Spain, which is highly unlikely, because I am not sure that I probably ever locked my door like that, guys. I'm telling you, in Spain, yeah, it's safe. All right, so at least where I live, it's extremely safe. So there's really never really a need for firearms, I guess. Not like in the United States of America, where under no circumstance will I go outside my house without a firearm. Generally multiple, right? Just in case. But yeah, in Spain, yeah, there are no guns. There are no guns moving around, guys.
Executing Pueblo shamans for sorcery and witchcraft. The Pueblo, who were a settled people, rebelled and kicked the Spaniards out of Santa Fe and the Rio Grande Valley, restricting Spanish activity to southern Texas and California from then on. The Spanish colonial social order didn't allow for a successful settling of this area, as it was unequipped to conquer and assimilate nomadic natives or patrol the vast lands. The British had a completely different colonial policy. They explicitly encouraged their colonial subjects to own firearms. More than that, they handed out the land they had taken from the natives to settlers. And that land, aka property, is the reason why most of these settlers came in the first place. Europe was a mess of...
Yeah, a lot of them came through like different forms of indentured servitude. Either they were from Ireland, or they were just basically peasants almost, guys. Because think about it, like around this time in Great Britain, they were basically picking up like orphans and like street kids and people that were occasionally, no, not really so much criminals, but they were not desirable to the aristocrats there, right? So what they were doing was they were forcing them into indentured servitude for a time. And the good thing about the British is that a lot of this stuff is still available to read. And so you can kind of find literal contracts of indentured servitudes where it would literally say, you're going to be paid for the time you are here, no problem. Then also at the same time, you'll be given land, you'll be fed, and what else happened here, guys? Yeah, you'd be given land and you'd be fed, and it should last no longer than, let's say, 7 years or so, right? So as soon as this, and also at the same time, and if your master disrespected you in any type of manner, physically or any real like abusive way, you could easily just sue said master. So obviously very different from like the chattel situation that was coming from West Africa at the time, mainly, right? Very different from that, but it's not the point. The point is that this is what Great Britain was actually offering its peasants and homeless people, just to basically get them out of the country because they were like eyesores or something.
Large landowners, serfdom, high grain taxes, and famines. Political rights, if existent at all, were also tied to how much property a person owned. Having a plot of land that was your own was a prospect irresistible to many, and irresistible to the British crown was what these...
Yeah, guys, also at the same time, people were volunteering for this because, again, they were being told, hey, you can go work for this organization that needs indentured servants, and then you'll get land afterwards, right? So people were volunteering.
Settlers would do
a lot of them
property. Buy slaves.
A lot of them from the UK, not Ireland. The Irish indentured servitude situation is very, very different than the British indentured servants, because a lot of these people were just taken. They were just literally, I think 15,000 of them were just taken and delivered to the Bahamas as indentured servants.
Grow cash crops, sell them to British trading companies, and thereby increase the wealth of the empire. And the British also allowed the means of defending that property. The settlers would be personally invested in their colonial property and thereby the colonial economy. The British would profit, not have to spend money on an expensive large standing army, could invest in a large navy to bully others, and the armed colonials would take care of the French, natives, and Spaniards because they weren't just protecting the empire, but their own property. The mistake the British made in the end was assuming that this colonial strategy wouldn't backfire.
Right? Exactly.
The colonial policy of handing out the land and permitting the ownership of guns for settlers is one the British practiced in every colony they settled, which is why all these countries have less constraining laws on private gun ownership to this day, except for those who in modern days introduced gun control laws. The United States, however, is different from the other colonies. Guns and the gun culture that developed became tied to property. The reason one owned a gun was to protect what was yours or what you had taken from others. It became essential to the promise of the country to those who came to it, but also part of its darkest chapters. As much as you may read or hear of the American gun culture as something tied to a violent history, racism, hunting, frontier life, or other, and as much as you might hear debates by legal scholars and politicians theorize the modern and past meanings of the Second Amendment, the truth of
as a Taurus, the judge.
Legal scholars and politicians theorize the
Guys, I've wanted those for so long.
modern and past meaning.
I mean, don't get me wrong, they're plentiful. They're plentiful. I just can never like find one, and I don't like ordering guns. I like to physically be in the store when there's one there.
of the Second Amendment.
Right here, the judge.
The truth of the matter is that this country's gun culture developed out of and goes hand in hand with the promise of owning your own property and being permitted to defend what is yours. And that is a powerful drive that is hard to break. German and French gun culture revolved around having guns to kill each other. Polish gun culture revolves around being prepared for invasion. Same with Swiss gun culture. And as Europe increasingly became a more peaceful place, these gun cultures, and with them the ownership of guns, eroded or were drastically changed and reinvented. The United States have barely enacted any regulations to limit ownership of firearms, even when
Barely? What are you talking about?
a sizable amount of the population used said firearms in an armed insurrection to keep slavery legal. If the Americans didn't restrict firearms ownership after they were used in an attempt to keep slavery legal, I doubt they will do so now after massacres and increased gun crime. There is, however, one thing that is steadily undermining the United States gun culture and might eventually be its undoing, something that is largely unnoticed in the modern gun debate.
Go ahead.
Ownership of private property is on the decline.
Yeah, unless, here's the thing. I get what he's saying here. I understand the analogy. The analogy is a solid one. The reason why so many Americans love firearms is because of being able to protect your own land. He's basically saying it's baked into our society. And if the insurrection that happened kind of around the time of the civil kerfuffle, around that time, didn't change the regulations, and what actually will? Nothing will. It's a part of our Constitution. Nothing will. But the thing about it is I mean, obviously, guys, we do have restrictions. So you can't just walk into somewhere and pick up a firearm and walk out, unless you are like licensed to carry, or you have one of these extreme. I have this license, by the way. But like if you are in a state that's like constitutional carry, that's a little different, right? I mean, those states have little to no regulation. I can tell you this right now, they don't. I don't know how like buying a firearm would be in these places. But when I'm in the United States of America, I am in the state of Georgia. And I abide by all of their very specific regulations. I can tell you, you're not walking into a gun store and buying a gun, bro. You're not. That's not happening. I don't think that's a thing. Not without any other type of like background checks. I mean, those are things that are in place to be in the way of you getting a firearm, right? Then we come to the situation of people committing absolutely heinous, crimes with these things. Yeah, I get it. Is that going to change our laws? No, it's not. But how can we kind of rectify it? A lot of these are mostly men, right? What is going on? Maybe we just need to work on mental health, maybe? Because I don't see how very specifically a tool. I know the comments. They're going to be like, but if they didn't have this tool, right, I understand. But I think people, okay, how about this? I'll give you guys a really good analogy. Fast food restaurants, okay, they are absolutely decimating populations faster than firearms probably could ever. Let's work on that. You get what I'm saying here, guys? Tobacco. There's so many other things. Right? I mean, I get it. I mean, listen, I personally, I carry specifically because I carry. I'm an American. I can carry, and I'm in the South, so I can open carry if I decide. I generally don't. You'll never really know I have a firearm on me, but I always do. Secondly, I also like shooting. It's fun, right? I think that if for someone's opinion to matter on firearms, personally, to me at least, like there's been a couple of people who I've encountered who absolutely just strongly dislikes firearms. I understand. Have you ever shot one? No. So then your opinion instantly doesn't matter to me, if that makes any sense. I appreciate that you have an opinion. Your opinion is your opinion. But it becomes extremely irrelevant if you've never, fired a gun. Like, for example, another random example here. I absolutely, strongly detest pickles and onions. I've had one in my mouth one time, so I can tell you that I don't like pickles or onions. Okay, an irrational one would be like okra, for example. I strongly detest okra, but I've never actually eaten it. I can look at it and tell you that I probably wouldn't like it, so I'll never eat it. So my very specific opinion on okra should not matter to someone who loves okra, even though I'm telling you okra is absolutely disgusting. It's like a green plant and it's like slimy. I'm looking at it, I see the texture, and I'm like, ew. Right? Another example. More examples. Tuna fish. Okay? I look at tuna and I'm like, it smells terrible. I don't want that nastiness. Right? So I'm going to disrespect tuna every single day of the week. I'm just going to openly disrespect it. Okay? My opinion on tuna shouldn't matter. Why? I've never eaten tuna. But I can look at it, smell it, and be like, this smells disgusting. I never want this in my mouth. Someone was like, oh, but that's just the canned tuna. The canned tuna stinks. Right. Fresh tuna is different. It doesn't matter. You get what I'm saying here? Your opinion should matter if you've actually have gone through whatever you're suggesting of other people not to do, if that makes any sense.
And with the American gun culture being so deeply tied to property rights, what is most likely to, in the end, change the legal landscape on firearms in the United States is the change of American society itself from property owners into indebted, rent-paying day laborers.
Right. Ooh. Now, I mean, guys, I don't know. Do I think that we're going to eventually slow down on us like procuring firearms? No, I'm pretty sure there are more firearms in the state of Georgia than there are people, because the average person I know has at least 10 in their house, at least 10. Like, that's the starting number, right? for the state of Georgia. That's the starting number. We have castle doctrine. We have the legal right to prevent any type of violent, forceful entry into our property. That very specific thing is important to understand, right? And in the state of Georgia, you really don't need a license any longer, really, to even carry. Okay, I'm one of the weird ones here. I don't think that was a really good idea, right? I don't mind everyone having a firearm, but I mind it at the same time. It's just like, I don't really want him to have one. But then who am I to say that? You know what I'm saying? Like, that guy over there is weird. I've known he's been weird my entire life. And now he can carry a firearm? But he's weird. You see what I'm saying here, guys? I don't know how you're going to buy it. We can start right there. Well, I guess you still have to go through the similar background checks to even buy one. But I guess he's been cleared. But I know the guy. He's weird. I don't really want to see. You see the problem, right? I want everyone to be able to, obviously, if you're American, I want you to absolutely utilize every single one of your rights. Absolutely, consistently. But also at the same time, I don't want the nut jobs, right? The absolutely, like, for example, people that consume a lot of alcohol while they're carrying, guys, that's an awkward one for me personally. I don't like that. I don't like seeing it. Like I went into a restaurant a couple of weeks ago, and I saw someone carrying, and I'm just like, open carrying at the bar, right? I don't drink alcohol because I always carry. I'm never really an alcoholic. I don't take any medicines that change my mind, again, because I carry. Because all of these things, you're going to be tested for these things if you actually have to, stop a threat, let's say, right? So if you have to stop a threat on your life, and if they find out that you have alcohol in your system, I highly doubt you're going to go home that day. You get what I'm saying here, guys? Like, you have to be extremely smart about these situations. So I personally don't enjoy seeing people that are consuming massive, copious amounts of alcohol carrying firearms. Now, see, maybe I'm a weird one, again, because a lot of people are like, oh, guns for everyone. And I'm just like, I don't know, maybe not guns for everyone. Not for that guy over here. He's weird. That guy is weird. See what I'm saying? But all right, listen. Enough rambling. You guys all have an absolutely amazing day and enjoy your day thoroughly.